Welcome to Concrete Conversations, the Indian real estate podcast. I'm Akshay.
And I'm Yash, and we're the hosts of the show. Technology is constantly adding new dimensions to the world around us, so it's only natural that we are witnessing an increase in applications of PropTech in India and around the world.
So to talk about the confluence of real estate and technology, we have with us Rehan Poonawala, the founder of ComXR, a virtual reality startup based in Mumbai.
ComXR uses augmented reality and virtual reality to provide specialized solutions across industries such as real estate, automotive, and healthcare.
So get ready for an immersive conversation about extended reality in real estate.
Hey Rehan, how are you today?
Hey guys, I'm doing good. Just been a busy day at work, but yeah, other than that, all good.
Good to hear that. So I thought we could start off by talking about your journey and how you kind of ended up working in this space because, VR is still a developing and pretty niche industry, especially in India.
Right, no, that's a good question. So the journey started about 4 years ago, and I was working at a startup at IIT on something slightly unrelated. But at that point, I was looking at starting something of my own. And I was looking at a bunch of new technology, trying to figure out what was going to be part of the future, what was going to work, and what sort of skills I had at the time. And a friend of mine had a VR headset, and he said I've just got this new headset, come on and try it over.
Right.
And that's the first time I tried this new age VR, the VR that we're all in right now. And essentially, I put the headset on, and at that point, I was wowed, super amazed, and I was shocked that this experience existed.
Right.
So that was somewhere around 2017. And then from there, after that session, I was okay, I got to figure out how to start looking at it, what are the possible use cases, what technology is required here. And I felt it was a good match for the skills that I had at the time. So that's how it started. And then from there, what happened was it went into you could say business mode, where we're looking at business use cases, and I got a few freelance developers together that were working on VR projects here in India and also freelancing for international companies.
Right.
And we started building out a few prototypes and showing it to people, and the business honestly just took off from there. It essentially just took off very organically, and we got our first project maybe about 4 months after we started looking into this deeply. So yeah.
Nice.
That's really cool. What was your first project that you started working on?
So with VR, the two natural use cases were visualization related projects. And
right.
My background is in the automotive industry. So the first time I could get my hands on anything, we started building an automotive project, essentially to help visualize cars, to configure them all inside virtual reality. And our first project that we did get was with an automotive supplier here in India. There's a German company that has now been a client for the last 4 years, and we've deployed VR at all their dealerships all across the country. So
nice. Wow.
Yeah, that was our first project. And quickly after that, it was a real estate project as well, because that has a very, very natural use case of VR, and we started showing it to people we knew in the industry, and it started resonating with architects, with people in the real estate space, and we got our first builder on board at that point as well.
That's perfect. I think you've preempted our next question, but can you tell us a little bit about these use cases within real estate that you've used VR for? I mean, there's some of them are obvious. I won't name them now. I'll let you name the various applications, but some might be a little more unassuming, right?
Right. No, that makes sense. And also, as ComXR, we're also just not, focused on VR. What we do is we build technology in the real-time space. So that's real-time 3D, that's virtual and augmented reality.
Nice.
And that's why the XR comes in. It's an umbrella term for extended reality.
Right.
And essentially, VR and AR come in under XR. But essentially, just to break it up really quickly for people who hear these terms, but usually see that they overlap a lot. But essentially, VR is virtual reality, and that's where you are in a completely virtual world away from reality. So generally the technology that's used to do this is a headset. So you put a headset on, and you're immersed in this virtual world. You don't see any of the real world around you.
Right.
With AR, it's slightly different because it's a mix of the two. And what it is essentially is where you take this virtual world and you layer it on top of the real world. So you have applications for real estate in both AR and VR.
Right.
But yeah, coming back to your question, the application that got us our first project and got us like traction was essentially for visualization, for developers to show their potential customers what the project looks like before they buy it.
Got it.
The thesis is that in the real estate space, you're selling a project, especially in like India, it's very common. You're selling the project much before the building goes up, before a brick is built, to like start the sales mode of the project.
Yeah.
So you don't often even have like a show flat. You have just like maybe 2D collateral that you communicate your designs through. So you have videos or you have like still renders. But with VR, what you can do is essentially take the customer through the complete project to the specific apartment that they would look to buy. So, for example, they want to like look at what the 2 BHK looks like in Tower 3. We can take them exactly to that one. They'll look at the view outside, see exactly that, all in virtual reality while wearing this headset. So that's our primary use case here.
Nice. So, it makes complete sense, like you're saying, because pre-selling and you want people to see the project in its entirety with the experience before it comes up. I'm guessing people were really wowed by this at first, but over time, has it become a little more mainstream as people kind of adjusted to it? How's the mindset towards seeing a flat in VR and having that, maybe level of trust? How has that changed over time?
So with our experience, what we've seen is that when we deploy it with a developer, when we deploy a project across any industry, and we work across automotive and manufacturing and wherever it is, like most people that go into the VR are doing it for the first time.
Right.
They may have tried a mobile version of VR in the past, but most of them doing like the 6 degree of freedom, which is where VR is currently, most of them have not seen VR like that. So, well, yes, like you said, the experience is like, it's very awesome. It's like it's quite a lot to take in when you go in there. And by that, I mean, like, you're quite wowed by the experience itself rather than, looking at the flat. So what happens is once the customer puts the headset on, they take a few seconds to just get over the fact that they were just a second ago in the sales office and now they're in their future home.
Right.
Yeah, it takes a bit of time to do that. But once that settles down, they spend a lot of time looking at the apartment. They usually come in with their families. And they look at the views from different heights. They select it all together. It becomes like quite a collaborative approach with the 2 or 3 or 4 family members that they have brought with them. And they spend about like when it's possible for the builder to deploy that way, they spend about 25 to 30 minutes each family, just exploring the VR.
Oh wow!
Going to the apartment, going to the project, and that kind of thing. Yes,
that's really cool. And I wanted to ask you, specifically for like sales fairs for real estate projects when they're showcasing properties, even internationally, has this application been used more so? And what is the kind of feedback you've received? Has there been any sort of tangible sort of feedback that comes in from maybe the NRI markets when they're looking at buying apartments, say in India, but they're living in Dubai or in Singapore or elsewhere in the world? And
right.
Has VR helped bridge that, understanding of what the finished product is going to be like and encouraged more investment?
So yeah, so that's what our initial thesis was, that it would be very useful for international buying.
Right.
But what we've noticed is that it actually has been way more effective with people buying locally, and especially people buying their first or second homes.
Oh, wow.
Because what we've noticed is that when someone, so like an NRI, is buying a home, they're already used to that buying process. They know how to interpret the renders that they see in that brochure or they see in that video and then translate that into what their home could be.
Right.
But when we go to first-time buyers in projects that we deployed, like in Bangalore, in the outskirts of Mumbai, in Mumbai as well, like a lot of the first-time buyers feel like the VR experience adds a lot there. So while the builder that we usually deploy this for is free to use the solution across all their sales channels, essentially. Where we've seen it being most effective is for like first-time buyers who are coming to the site to buy the property, to go through the VR experience and then make their decisions. That's where we found it to be most useful.
Right.
That's interesting.
I wanted to just bring it back to you talking about XR being extended reality, and how it covers kind of the mix of AR and VR. So we've spoken a bit about VR for real estate now, but I wanted to know from you what some of the potential AR applications for this could be.
Right.
Like if I recall correctly, there's IKEA, I think, has some features where you can project their furniture into a particular space to see if it fits. Is it something in that direction?
So that's a very good use case for AR, and essentially AR works well when you have like the space built out and already ready. And say it's empty, for example, you could totally use an application like IKEA's and design your own home with their AR application running on your mobile today. Like you don't have to wait for some future technology to come in; you can use that today.
Right.
And essentially, what that does is it just shows you the catalog of all the furniture that they have. But what it enables you to do now is to place it into your future home or place it into that space and see what it all looks like and comes together.
Right.
So it's technically like a completely empty space, but when you look at it through the lens of the phone camera, you get like a completely like a fully furnished apartment in front of you. So you can pick and choose. You can choose colors. There are a lot of AR applications where you have placement of furniture, but also like seeing what different paints are on the walls, seeing what different bedsheet covers look like, like all that stuff applies to AR, and it enables different types of selling channels that wasn't possible like maybe just 4 or 5 years ago.
That makes a lot of sense, and what I'm seeing here is that there's a lot of flexibility that virtual reality gives you when you're looking at a property that perhaps looking at a physically finished show flat doesn't really give you. Like just now you gave us the example of choosing wall colors or fabric colors. Have you seen any interesting applications of virtual reality by architects or interior designers, or maybe even customers who've bought a home but then in the design planning stage when they're trying to select certain designs or select how things would look? Is there an application there as well?
No, so there is definitely. And coming back to the point where you said like you have that show flat built out, and at that point what would be the use of the VR? So essentially how our operations work is that once the show flat, eventually the show flat does come up at all these places where we've deployed VR, because the real estate company has been doing it for years and they're not going to stop doing that overnight. So they have their show flat there, and they'll show the customers what that fully furnished 3 BHK looks like. But now they're selling so much inventory, which includes like a 5 BHK and a 2 BHK and a 1 and like a 2 and 3 combined and all these different combinations.
Right.
And what we do in VR essentially is we add to that show flat experience by having these digital models inside VR that the customer can view. So the customers coming to buy a 2 BHK, they can go through the 3 BHK, show flat and see what the materials look like and the finishes, and those kinds of things can be communicated well in real life. When you want to see your actual future space, VR works really well there. So that's like one way how it augments this this physical show flat that gets built at these sites. But the second way also the VR helps is, and like you said, in this customization. So what we've noticed is that when we have like these 2 or 3 BHK apartments that we build out, but like sometimes you have a couple that comes in and they don't have kids. So the second bedroom in VR, we click a button and you can show it as a den, or you can show it as a TV room, or you show it as a guest bedroom. And if they do have kids, you click a button and you show it as a kid's bedroom.
Nice.
So essentially it allows for a lot of customization depending on the client's preferences, what they like, what sort of styles they like, and a lot of that is possible to show them, which is not possible to do with the show flat. So customization is definitely possible because you're working now completely in the digital world.
Right.
And it's kind of like an information advantage for them, right? They not only get to see maybe like the basic layout, but like you said, customization, different potential options or different things that they could do with this space as well. So that's kind of on the client side. I also wanted to ask you, what is the feedback like on the developer side? I'm sure you've deployed this in a number of projects now. Do they see it as a value add? Do they see it as a way of reaching out to more people?
Right, yeah. So that's a good question, because we've spoken about right now what the feedback is for the customer who's looking at their future home. But for the developers, there are like two clear advantages. One is that you can start selling even before like your sales office is ready, before your show flat is up, so that that 5 or 6 months of lead time that they would have to wait previously to show the customer what that apartment looks like now gets done in VR.
Right.
So it helps shorten that sales cycle. The second is, and the main thing is that it helps essentially reduce their costs. So if a show flat costs about 1 crore to 1.5 crores to build, a VR apartment costs less than a tenth of that, right? So they could have multiple configurations, multiple apartments, within the same project, which you were not able to show previously to the customers, and that becomes like a huge value add for them. And then the last thing also is that now you have like this they had these audio visuals that they played, and they had all these 3D renders that they created. So what we do is essentially we try to work with a lot of the same material that they've already created for their walkthrough videos and for their still renders for newspaper ads and things like that, and we convert that into VR. So it helps with essentially reusing a lot of the assets that they have, and convert that to like a good experience for their customers coming into the site.
Right. Rehan, before we build ahead with the discussion points, I thought I'd just ask you here, has there been any interesting project that you've worked on that has, allowed you to use VR or AR or a combination of both in some unique ways, or something that really stood out to you, or the way you had to think about the project and the visualization of a space?
So, well, in terms of like what sort of projects we work on, typically in the real estate space are mainly for visualization. And there are a lot of like interesting projects we worked on, but like one of the first few ones we did was there was a developer building like a very cost-effective apartment in Bhandup in Mumbai. It was like a one-bedroom. It was a one-bedroom room that costed somewhere around like 60 or 70 lakhs. So it was targeted at a slightly different audience. But what they wanted to do was show the customer what that room looked like in different configurations, because everything was like modular and everything was foldable, and you could put things in different places. And what we did was we created about like 16 different configurations that room could look like with the existing furniture in there. So you click a button and the dining table would fold up and go and hang on the wall, and the bed would come down. And then at some point you'd have like the closet open up, and you'd have another space here, and just showing multiple ways how you can use the same space in the day, at night, and give that whole value to the user. And that's something that really worked well for that particular project, and we've like deployed a lot of them so far after that.
That's really cool. Do you work typically with the architects on this one, or on this side, or do you work typically with like the developers directly?
Right. So a lot of the times we work with the developers directly, because they're the end decision maker.
Right.
The way it works is we work with the sales and marketing department most of the time of the developers. With the architects, they come in at much earlier and they leave usually, by the time our projects kicks off. They are not really much in the picture because they've set up a lot of the stuff already. So they have the design guides and they have the space all created out already. So by the time we come in, it usually is with the sales and marketing departments of these companies.
Nice. So two things I wanted to follow up on. So one, though, you mentioned, the project in Bhandup. So I just wanted to ask you, what has your experience been? That has it been an interesting proposition for developers across kind of markets and price points? Or is it something that has been used more a bit in the luxury segment?
So it's so where we find a lot of the success is at that point where you're selling from somewhere between 1 crores and about 4 crores, and that's where the conversions that we've had are like, we've seen the numbers be much higher. With the luxury segment, you get into the problem where people are buying like maybe sometimes they're buying first homes. A lot of times they understand the buying process. So like with VR, it doesn't add as much value because they're already able to visualize the space without going through the VR experience.
Right.
But in that 1 to 3 or 1 to 5 crore category, what we've seen is that people find that difficult to make that jump looking at the floor plans and the brochures and those kinds of things, and that's where VR helps a lot.
Right. And another thing was that, have you used this only for show flats and flats, or has there been a case where shown maybe amenities and shared spaces as a part of a development through all of these techniques as well?
Yeah, so that's a good question. A lot of the times it's the flats and the show flats, but we've done multiple projects now which show off the amenities, because at the end of the day, as a developer, you want to communicate the lifestyle that customer is going to live in.
Yeah.
So we've developed like the pool area and the deck, and you walk into the lobby, and all that stuff is also been developed for customers to go through.
Nice.
Fantastic. Rehan, looking forward, do you think that VR and AR are going to become central to real estate marketing strategies?
Yeah, so I think like just going forward in general, like VR and AR are going to be essential in like all types of marketing strategies, whether it's the automotive companies that we work for, whether it's real estate, and essentially it's just a better medium to communicate like 3D space. So that's essentially why it's going to be there. So it's a better medium to to communicate what measurements look like without writing them on a piece of paper. You put someone in that place and you get them to see exactly what the distance from the sofa to the television is without just having them to imagine what that will be.
Right.
So putting people in that space to show them what it finally looks like is like the best way of selling it without having the apartment there. And the way you can't bring the apartment to the user, but you can do that in VR, and that really helps. That really helps to bridge that gap between their imagination and what the real estate developer wants to communicate. So I think yes, it'll be a very important tool, and probably like definitely an essential tool going forward. Yes.
Nice.
I think we've covered pretty much most of the questions we had in mind. So I just had a question, maybe a little separate from the real estate side of things. But since this is such an interesting space and you work in a bunch of different industries with it, anything that stands out, any absolutely unique or new application that you've worked on in this space recently?
Yeah. So there are when we initially started, a lot of our projects were based on visualization, and essentially what that means is you put the user inside the VR world and they get to see and just like view what that particular product looks like. Now, whether that product is an apartment, whether it's a car, a bike, a piece of furniture, like it's a lot of like viewing what that is. So right now where we are is like a lot of traction we've seen on the simulation and training side, and that's where we do a lot of our work going for the last year or so.
Nice.
And essentially what that allows you to do is basically create a simulated safe environment in virtual reality to allow someone to learn a new skill. Now it's similar to how pilots had access to flying simulators
Right.
For the last 20 years, and they've been able to do that. Now what VR enables you to do is without all that hardware that's required to create a whole flight simulator, with just a headset and like really inexpensively, you're able to create simulators for different types of events. And an example of an application would be in the automotive space, where essentially you have the car in front of you in VR, and you simulate something going wrong in the car. Now the technician has to follow the steps to do the work with his or her own hands and learn from his mistakes. And eventually he's outputted a score whether he's passed or failed that particular tutorial. And that essentially they do it 100 times till they get it right. And once they know it, they go onto the field, and then they're like pros at it without actually having to learn on the job. So those kinds of applications are what we've seen picking up a lot recently.
That's amazing.
Do you find that the success in a VR environment translates very easily into the real world application?
So we've worked a lot with this. So I've seen cases where it translates, and we've seen cases where it doesn't. A lot of times it does translate where you have like a fixed pattern of steps you need to go through. So for example, if there's anything like a safety procedure where you have to follow those 12 steps, or there's like a routine procedure that you'll follow like 15 or 17 steps, like that's something where VR works really well. Anything that's procedural.
Right.
If you have to do a lot of work with like your touch and your feel and a lot of tactile work, that to learn how essentially how much pressure to add into a particular part, or how to feel whether something is broken or not, VR doesn't work really well that way right now. I mean, right now we're in a very basic stage of VR. It's only been like 5 years since this whole industry has come about. But
right.
So anything that's procedural works really well. Anything that's like requires a lot of tactile and learning of touch and feel, we feel like those kinds of applications are still a few years away from being implemented well in VR.
So no doctor is going to practice surgery in VR anytime soon.
Well, that's a good point, and that's when I was talking about it, my learning from that came up, because doctors do practice this in VR, but they can't do it for all procedures. So that's where our learning came in initially, where if you have to learn how to essentially drill a hole through a bone with VR, it's going to show you that you have to take these 5 steps before you do it. But to actually do it, you need that physical simulator, or you need the actual bone in front of you to do it. So essentially what happens is you learn the steps, but you may not learn how much pressure to add and those kinds of things. So yeah.
Right. All right. I think with that, we've covered pretty much everything we wanted to talk to you about, Rehan. So thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much. And I'm excited to see where VR and ComXR go in the future.
No worry, guys. You're most welcome. I had a great conversation here today.
If you enjoyed this conversation, be sure to follow Concrete Conversations on Instagram to know more about upcoming episodes and for some behind-the-scenes content.
For more deep dives into the world of Indian real estate, stay tuned for more Concrete Conversations.